Well, that was a lot closer than it had any right to be. But, nevertheless.
Yeah! In your fucking face, fuckwad!
So let's get this right out of the way. I need to give credit to the Raiders coaching staff. They had a really solid game plan. The Raiders were minimizing the danger of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb by having all these design plays where Derek Carr was going to get the pass off as quickly as possible, which minimized the threat of our pass rush. I thought that was really smart, and they also were able to get Marshawn Lynch on all these big runs. That was really good on part of the Raiders. And then the Raiders defensive coordinator, Paul Guenther, had an incredible game. Somehow, without Khalil Mack, this man manages to put on the pressure on Case Keenum and really, really bring the Broncos to their knees in the first half. And with all that being said, let me proceed to laugh at the Raiders somehow managing to lose that game.
Did you see that jerk?
Oh my God, the Raiders. Why are you so awful? How can you be in such control of that game for pretty much the majority of it and then blow it? Only the fucking Raiders, right? Lastly, I'll just say Derek Carr, he played really well. Didn't turn over the ball, didn't have many incompletions, threw for 288 yards and 1 touchdown. That was an impressive performance. I really thought he was going to be a turnover machine. He certainly proved me wrong, but that didn't seem to matter because they fucking lost, right? I'm going to say this. The Broncos defense played well. A lot of those drives in the first half that the Raiders had going were very threatening, and the Broncos did very well to prevent any of those from ending up as touchdowns. And I stand by that despite really on the stats side, they didn't have much, just 1 sack. The Broncos offense started out really bad, punting on all 3 of their first 3 possessions. And then on their 4th possession, Case Keenum throwing a interception near the red zone. That was not good. In the first half, the Broncos had just two possessions go for over 10 yards. And they had 5 in the first half. In that same span, the Raiders had 2 possessions go for more than 60 yards, and several went for 40 plus, I believe. Definitely not pretty for the Broncos to start off that game, especially not for Case Keenum, who in the first half looked awful. Looked just atrocious. 5 for 11 with 1 interception, man. I gotta tell you, at times in that first half, it reminded me a little bit of a slightly more accurate version of Tim Tebow, and also a lot smaller and less muscle mass. However, in the second half, the Broncos really stepped it up. All 4 of the Broncos' possessions in the second half went for 50-plus yards, and that was really more of what I was expecting today. Not that garbage we saw in the first half. It also goes without saying, Case Keenum really stepped up in the second half, especially after that lackluster first half. He really just got his shit together. Thank God, because we really needed that. But with all that being said, we were lucky to escape with victory in this game, and that's what's heartbreaking to say, because the Raiders suck, all right? The difference in this game ended up being a blocked extra point in the first half. It really did remind me of a really sloppy, messy version of that AFC Championship game against the Patriots from a few years ago, where it just seemed like this small thing that affected the score in what seemed like a small way at the time really had a profound impact on the outcome. And that was absolutely true of today. And relying on luck or a kicker to not make the field goal, and I realized the Broncos got a hand on it. I'm not saying that was luck, but it is luck in the sense of the sheer small chances of it happening, and that ended up being the difference. And I'm saying that this team cannot rely on shit like that going forward. With that said, I'd like to highlight one play in particular that really that really just fucked the Raiders and led to them losing this game. And that was the Raiders just fucking baffling decision to go for it on, I believe it was the Broncos' 34-yard line on 4th and 1 with 13 minutes and 11 seconds left in the fourth quarter.
9 defenders.
Carr throwing. Drop.
Listen, John Gruden, Chucky, you hearing me? If you kick a field goal, you're up 12 points on the Broncos with about 13 minutes left in the game. Are the Broncos likely to come down the field and score a touchdown? Probably. They're playing very well in the second half. But you know what? When they do that, you're going to have the ball back, and the way you've been playing all day, you can probably kill off a lot of time on the clock. So if they have to come back down the field and score another touchdown, even if you don't score, guess what? It's probably going to be really hard for them to pull that off. But instead, Derek Carr makes a pass falls incomplete, and I got to tell you, that was hilarious to watch. Because I kind of just couldn't believe what I had just seen. Derek Carr had been accurate the whole game, and everything had been caught. All of a sudden, to see an incomplete pass at a time like that. Classic Raiders. The Raiders would go on to be stopped on their very next possession, and that led to the Broncos getting the ball back. And with 2 minutes left in the game, Case Keenum drives the team down the field. They kick a field goal, win the game. If it is not for some awful decision to rule that Sutton's catch was not a catch, the Broncos score 3 touchdowns in the second half as soon as they make the change to be more aggressive. And of those 3 touchdown passes, those all would have come on 3 straight possessions. Now, that's what I like to call improvement. That's really palpable change. So I feel like that Broncos team that showed up in the second half was a scary team. That was impressive to watch. And on top of that, the defense came up with big stops in the second half. I believe giving up just 1 touchdown in the entirety of the second half, which, again, very impressive. The rest of that, the Raiders couldn't do shit, especially the 4th and 1 that I had previously mentioned, although that was... Let's be honest, that was more of the Raiders being the Raiders than the Broncos being good. So with that being said, I thought I'd mention some players that I thought did well. On offense, Emmanuel Sanders and Philip Lindsay had pretty excellent games. On defense, I thought Von Miller and Bradley Chubb had good games, despite, again, the fact that they really didn't put up a lot of stats numbers. But one player in particular on defense that I thought played very well was Domata Peko. He had a very good game, helping to stop Marshawn Lynch and company, and we're just really playing a solid game. So, Case Keenum, still a huge concern for me. He's still making poor decisions during the game, and he's still a little inaccurate when throwing. You could see on a few throws against the Raiders, he was still throwing the ball a little too high. Right now, he's playing fine, but if we're gonna beat the Chiefs on October 1st, this team can't just be fine. They've got to be really good. And that's the main thing that worries me, is I just don't feel like we're that team right now. We're going to have to really demonstrate against the Ravens we can be better. But I'll get into the Ravens prediction in another video. I said that if the Broncos didn't win this game by a large margin, Vance Joseph can officially welcome himself to the hot seat, at least for me. And I'm going to stick by that. But let me begin with what I think he did well. He was able to recognize at halftime that the offense needed to change, needed to be more aggressive, and I don't think it's a coincidence that all of a sudden they come down the field and score a touchdown as soon as they make that change. And like I said, if it's not for that Sutton call, the Broncos scored 3 touchdowns on their first 3 possessions in the second half. That's fucking impressive. With that being said, though, my problem with Vance Joseph is with some of these explanations he's giving me. I don't like them. For example, he has no explanation as to why this team struggled so much on offense to start the game. This is a problem because you're the head coach. You've got to know these things. It's your duty. So please figure that out, because we need, whatever it is, we need to correct it, because we're playing the Chiefs in a few weeks. And if we want any hope of winning that game, the offense has got to start hot. I feel like Vance Joseph mentally set the team up to play down to their competition by telling them how hard it was going to be. I don't like it that Vance Joseph was giving a talk about how this is a divisional game, so it's hard. I get trying to guard against the upset, right? I get that. But these are the Raiders. They suck this year. The Broncos need to know how unacceptable it is to lose. And as such, they need to go out there and be ready to perform. And lastly, I'm just going to say, Vance Joseph saying, I'm not worried about this team, really has me scratching my head, because I can't figure out why the fuck not. This team has not demonstrated that they can play consistently good football for 4 quarters. They have a good half. They have a bad half. Case Keenum has a good drive, has a bad drive. He's throwing touchdowns, he's throwing interceptions. The only thing consistent so far has been that the run game's good, and that, you know, our pass rush is still pretty solid. The whole defense has been pretty good to start this season, so I'm not gonna take too many shots at them, but specifically on offense, right? Is there not some level of concern that this team will not be able to be aggressive against better defenses because of Case's poor occasional decisions? And then when they decide to be more conservative in those situations, that the conservative play calling won't get it done? Because clearly it wasn't getting it done today against a really bad Raiders defense. So there's also something wrong with our conservative play calling. And if our conservative play calling is completely shot, we need to be really good at being aggressive. I'll get more into what I want to see against the Ravens in my next video. But specifically with this game, I'm really starting to become concerned about the conservative part of our offense. Yes, we can move the ball with our running backs, but passing wise, when we're trying to do these quick passes like with what Derek Carr did today, it's just been disastrous. And I can't say that I'm feeling very good about it. And I'm going to need to see a lot of improvement from the conservative play calling. But with that being said, here's my definitive statement for the Broncos after this game. We do not know what kind of team this is yet. They're 2-0, but they're not convincingly 2-0. I think they've beaten 2 bad teams to be 2-0. The Broncos that showed up in the second half looked like they could potentially win a Super Bowl. But the Broncos that showed up in the first half might only win 4 games this year. If we're really going to be competitive this year and threaten other teams, we need to step up. With that all being said, fuck the Raiders. Go Broncos.